Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch for Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch for Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch for Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then Good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch for Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want.
Alexander and I met up with Brooklyn's charismatic Borough President Eric Adams not too long ago and had the pleasure of an hour-long deep dive into his journey to the plant-based lifestyle, his meaningful work as a public official, and the responsibility he feels toward improving the well-being of his constituents. As a Black leader and former type 2 diabetic, Adams serves as an example that the plant-based lifestyle is not a white person thing, but an accessible choice everyone can make to live healthier, more fulfilling lives. Just 8 days ago, he won the general election to become New York City's mayor come January 1st. It was a monumental feat, and according to the New York Times, Mr. Adams will enter City Hall with very few of the advantages that Bill de Blasio enjoyed 8 years ago. He may have to guide the city's recovery without the same generous surpluses and steady economy, for example. Unlike Mr. de Blasio, Mr. Adams only barely won the Democratic primary. To govern effectively, he will also have to find a way to reassure those who didn't vote for him, which includes a large portion of voters in his own party, that he will be mayor for all New Yorkers. The real challenge, though, as we see it, comes in January, when the new mayor will begin setting the pandemic-scarred city back on its feet. We can't think of a better human or candidate for this job, though, as a focus on health, both immediate and long-term, has consistently been one of Eric Adams' pillars of passion. We also touch on Mr. Adams' experiences while serving 22 years in the police force and get his take on the current social discourse surrounding the Black Lives Matter movement. Adams is thoughtful, informed, relatable, and empowering. We really hope you enjoy this episode and let us know what you think, especially if you live in the Big Apple, what your hopes and dreams are for your new mayor, Mr. Eric Adams.
Our guest today is really sparking real change in his city, in his state, and all over the country. So there is immense power, I think, in individual change, obviously, just as we're speaking about. But there's real lasting power in true systemic and systematic change. And our guest today is driving plant-based food policy to pave the way for a healthier New York City and set an example for other cities to follow. Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams is a pioneer when it comes to influencing the plant-based lifestyle with politics. He led the initiative to implement Meatless Mondays in all New York City public schools and is currently working on a pilot program to offer students, wait for it, non-dairy milk alternatives. Prior to his current role, he worked for 22 years as an NYPD officer and served as New York State Senator for 4 terms. Now running for mayor of New York in 2021. So exciting. Adams has the potential to make even greater changes to benefit the lives of many millions. So let's talk politics. Of course, we're going to talk food and health but welcome, Honorable Adams.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies, for allowing me just to engage in a nice conversation. I think the name of your show is so profound, Switch for Good. And it's really, we may be talking about dairy, but I think in every aspect of one's life is an opportunity to switch and do things for good in a very real way. And I'm excited about just engaging in a lively conversation with you.
So Eric, you are Brooklyn Borough President, and Brooklyn was very hard hit by COVID. How are you all doing now?
Extremely challenging. I think that we are really dealing with this pandemic like other municipalities. Brooklyn is the largest of our 4 boroughs in the city of New York. And for those of your listeners and viewers who are not familiar with this type of structure, we're like the county executives of other municipalities. And we're the largest municipality in the city of New York with 2.6 million people, high level of diversity. 47% of Brooklynites speak a language other than English at home, so it's extremely diverse. In addition to that, we're already dealing with major healthcare crises in the borough. So really, coronavirus just exposed the lack of proper healthcare systems already.
What is the leading disease, leading cause of death? Like, we know that with coronavirus, you're especially in danger if you have a comorbidity. What is a leading disease that you guys are dealing with in Brooklyn, the population?
And it's so funny when I hear people say that because really Americans equal comorbidity. Yeah. It's unfortunate, but it's a rarity that you don't find in an American that doesn't have, particularly once they reach a certain age, that they're not experiencing several chronic diseases. But the big issue in Brooklyn is diabetes. And as you know, it is really the leading cause of blindness, leading cause of non-trauma limb amputation, and leading contributor to kidney failure, heart disease, and so many others. And our numbers are extremely high in Brooklyn in the area of diabetes, which is the umbrella for so many other chronic diseases.
Mm-hmm. Well, then you're the perfect person to lead Brooklyn to out of COVID and to into a healthier space as a whole, because you grew up the son of a butcher, eating the standard American diet, and you developed type 2 diabetes yourself. Can you tell us that story?
It's amazing that I think we're all looking for our cocoon moment. I think about, when I read a story when someone said a caterpillar looked up at a butterfly and said, "You'll never get me in one of those," only to realize that when you go through your transformation and your moment in a cocoon, you're going to come out being able to fly to higher heights. And that's how I felt 4 years ago. As you indicated, had a standard American diet. Meat was at the center of my diet. Everything was fried and processed. And after I concluded my 22 years as a police officer, was in my time, as soon as I came into the role as the borough president, I was experiencing really what I learned later to be advanced stages of diabetes. I was out of the country. It was stomach discomfort that sent me to my internist, who, after having me do a check of my colon and my stomach, when I came out of sedation, he indicated that I was experiencing advanced stages of diabetes that included vision loss. I lost vision in my left eye, and I was losing in my right as well. My ophthalmologist actually stated I was legally blind, and I had to turn in my driver's license. And I had permanent nerve damage, that tingling in my hands and feet that I was really shaking off and ignoring. Turned out to be permanent nerve damage related to the diabetes, and high blood pressure, high cholesterol, all of the symptoms. And it wasn't until I went to 5 doctors, some of the best doctors in the city, who were endocrinologists, who stated that, "Eric, there's not much you can do. You're going to be on medicine the rest of your life, and your vision loss is permanent, and your nerve damage is permanent. It could eventually lead to amputation." And there was not much I could do. And I recall receiving these pamphlets from all of those doctors that said living with diabetes. And I did something I like to say extremely scientific. I went to Google and Googled reversing diabetes, and all of this information came up and sent me down a new path.
And is it true that you reversed your diabetes in about 3 months?
What happened was I went to see Dr. Esselstyn in Ohio, the Cleveland Clinic. He was one of the pieces of information that I was able to obtain after going through a Google search. And I started reading Dr. Barnard's book, Reversing Diabetes, and Dr. Greger's book, How Not to Die. And I said to myself, I'm not a doctor, but I'm an ex-cop. I know how to do investigations, and let's go where the facts take me. And Dr. Esselstyn told me after I went to see him at the Cleveland Clinic, he says, Eric, if you change your diet, you could reverse your condition for the most part. And I remember him saying that, and I looked at him and I said, what is with this crazy guy? He's telling me to stop eating chicken and steak, and I'm losing my sight. But I had no other choice at that time. And so I returned to the city, looked at my cupboards, and he was right. All my food was processed, high in fat, sugar, oil. And I decided to throw everything out and went whole food, plant-based. In 3 weeks, my vision returned. Whoa. And in 3 months, my diabetes went in remission. My nerve damage went away. My blood pressure normalized. My cholesterol normalized. And the ulcer that sent me in the doctor's office in the first place, I don't know when it went away. It could have been in 3 weeks. It could have been in a month or the 3 months. I just one day woke up and said, you know what? I'm no longer feeling that discomfort in my stomach. And no medicine. It was all the original medicine, food. And I've never looked back ever since.
And you also lost about 30 pounds. Is that correct?
Yes, unbelievable. I tell people all the time when I dropped to 30 pounds, 35 actually, I don't have a six-pack. I have a case. My body has never been in that good shape.
I've seen the before and after. It's pretty remarkable. Oh, that's wonderful. What do people, since Brooklyn has a high rate of type 2 diabetes, you've shared this story, one-on-one, I'm sure, millions of times. What is the reaction with people that are suffering from diabetes in terms of your story? And are they wanting to try and change it through food? Do they believe you?
Yes, they do. And I think that's a very good question. For far too often, particularly in the community like Brooklyn, when you start talking whole food, plant-based, people say, oh, that's a white thing. What are you talking about? And so I became a credible messenger. Many people knew me because of my advocacy around fairness and policing. And so, it's amazing that really your life journey is really preparing you for what probably is your true purpose. I thought reform and policing was my true purpose, but I believe helping families live a healthy lifestyle is really my true purpose, and everything was just the dress rehearsal for when I get on this stage now. And so when I walk into senior centers, they're saying, hey, this is Eric Adams. This is someone we trust, someone we value. So when I start talking about my journey and then share with them my 80-year-old mother who was diabetic for 15 years, 7 years on insulin, 2 months after going whole food plant-based, mom was able to get off her insulin after 2 months and many of the medications that she was on. And so it helps a lot that I'm just, someone's son, everyday young man that, many of my seniors see me as what they see their grandson is, or many of the parents see me as what they would see in their son. So I'm just a kid next door that's saying that this thing that has really crippled our community, we could take control of it, and it's just giving people hope.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're definitely very popular in Brooklyn because you were voted in with 90% of the vote, and which is amazing. And actually doing, Eric, when I was doing the research, I really reel on you and all that you're doing, which of course we can't cover here. I realized, wow, this is why we have to vote locally, because local politicians make such a difference in our lives. So just that's an aside. But I wanted to ask you, what was it that you were doing wrong that got you to this diabetic state with so many comorbidities that your constituents can relate to? And then I'd like you to talk about what you're doing right, because as a politician, it's not easy to fit in exercise and eating well when you're traveling around, kissing babies and going to restaurants and things like that. This is, after COVID, you'll do it again. So what were you doing before that got you to where you are now? Because I think your story, a lot of people can relate to.
And also, if I may, I want to touch on what you were saying about local interaction and participation. We often look at national leadership as controlling what happens on the ground, and that is not true. I believe we're entering a cycle of great city-states again, where cities are going to start coming together and looking at best practices. We see what happened with the Paris Agreement in our environment and how the country may have moved out, but cities are still participating. And I think we're going to start looking at what other cities are doing to deal with these major crises, because no matter what happens on a national level, it trickles down to the cities, and the cities must solve these problems. And that is what happened in this case, and is continuing to happen around our healthcare crisis, which is not sustainable. We can't argue that the cost of healthcare is being shoved down to the city levels. 30 million Americans are diabetic, 84 million are pre-diabetic. We're spending 80 cents on the dollar on healthcare. 70% of our 12-year-olds have early signs of heart disease, which is the number one killer in America. When you start to look at this, you begin to say to yourself, we can no longer wait. This is a real crisis. And when I looked at my life prior to making this amazing transformation, I was eating the same things that Americans eat every day, fast food. Again, meat was the center of my plate. We grew up in a culture that if someone came to your house and had dinner and you didn't have meat on the menu, you were really seen as being, too poor and too embarrassing. So we built into the narrative of what it is to be an American. We associated with how much meat you have in your presence. Thanksgiving, you had the ham, you had the turkey, you had the fried chicken. When you went out to picnics, or you went to any other social gathering, it was about the joy of who's going to carve the turkey. How do you like your hamburger on the grill? What do you want your steak to look like? So we created this narrative that over time, it actually brainwashed us that we are addicted to meat because that meat has been part of how we identified ourselves as Americans. And so that is what my life was like, as a cop. Stopping at the fast food restaurant, getting a good steak, hanging out with the friends, making sure, what's the best steakhouse. We started to judge ourselves and identify ourselves about where you are on the meat scale and how well you can consume a meat. And so my meals, for the most part, was anything fried, anything that was processed, and anything that had a high level of meat to it.
Did it take any time for your taste buds to transition? That's a pretty high saturated fat diet, which we know is extremely addictive, and high salt content too. Your first day, you went into your cupboard, you said, and you looked at everything, and you're like, oh, Esselstyn is right. And what did you eat first? And were you like, oh, this is terrible. How am I ever going to transform?
Yes. You hit it out the park, because what was amazing was the intensity of the alteration of my taste buds, the intensity of it, but the short period of its changing itself. So it was extremely intense to all of a sudden go from this fat taste, this sugar taste, this processed taste. But once the intensity dissipated, such a short period of time, I was at a good place. And what was challenging for me is that I was not a cook. I didn't cook my meals. Everything was, I shopped out and ate in restaurants or other fast food chains. So when I couldn't find the meals I was looking for the most part, I had to try to cook my own meals. And that first week, I was like, oh, Lord, don't tell me this is my destiny. It was so terrible. I used to make a cereal in the morning and mix them with water. It was just so hideous. And then I remember sitting down one morning when I woke up and I was doing my morning meditation. And it just came to me that immerse yourself in this experience. Stop trying to find the items you can't eat any longer and look at the universe of new things you can start eating. And I just started day by day, started new meals every week, mastering the meals, started each week. I would learn a different spice, learn where it comes from, the power. I'm amazed that the spices are more powerful than the foods we eat. And I just started to really enjoy it. And I got over the mental block of now I'm being denied something, and I embrace the whole belief you are now being introduced to something new. Enjoy this experience, lean into it, and it has been an amazing journey. I just cannot tell you how I feel as just a human being. You know, sometimes I think about it and I just almost get teared up because of what has awakened in me of just thinking that when I was first told I was diabetic, I thought I was buried. But in reality, I was planted, and the fruits of my harvest is going to show other families how they can live a healthy lifestyle. This is so exciting for me, and I just can't believe how much I've been blessed to be able to do this.
The New York Times did a profile on you not too long after you became plant-based, and you've been plant-based now for about 4 years. And they talked about how you had a full-size refrigerator in your Borough President office, and how you had a hot plate. You cooked in the office, and you also had a stationary bike, I think, and an elliptical. So you really were committed to this lifestyle, even with the huge responsibility you have as a Brooklyn Borough President.
And it is nonstop. I must say, every half an hour, for the most part, my staff is moving me to a different location or to do a different event. We must do at least 12, 13 meetings and events a day, outside of course, your emails and your tweets and reading policy papers and drafting policies. And it's just a full nonstop life. And I said to myself that, I always think about when an airline pilot or crew tells you, in case of an emergency on a plane, put the mask on yourself before you put it on someone you're traveling with, because you're no good to yourself, to anyone, if you're not good to yourself first. And so I used to build my life, my meals around my life. Now I build my life around my meals. And I do a lot of prep to make sure that I can eat a very balanced and healthy meal, that I'm not snacking on junk food. And then I find creative ways. There are things you could do every day. You don't need a gym membership. A Stairmaster is just a sophisticated way of saying taking the stairs. Get a standing desk in your office. Get a stationary bike as you read your emails, so that you could, use your bike. Bring in a hot plate if you can. If not, have a nice dish warmer to put your food in that can keep your food warm throughout the day. There's sometimes I'm on the road the entire day. I bring a little bag with me that can keep my food warm if it's something warm, or just eat a very natural salad with fruits, and be creative in what you eat. Eating healthy should not be boring. Food must be good for you. It must taste good to you, and it must look good to you. And I really tell people, really explore different tastes and break the rules that we were told you could only eat certain meals during the morning or breakfast. I eat oatmeal sometimes 3 times a day, mixed with a salad. It's a nice grain. It gives it a nice taste. And I learned ways of mixing fruits in some of my vegetables to get a little sweet taste, or oil and lemon. And so it's about really enjoying your meal and exploring the full scope of healthy meals choices.
I love that. It's definitely true that unless you are at like a state fair, politicians generally do not share what they eat. I mean, I never hear any politician really talk about what's on their plate. And I can definitely understand why you decided to incorporate it, into your stance, right? Because it completely changed your life, and how many other people's lives can be changed and lives saved. But did anyone caution you against it in the beginning? I'm just thinking about just potential general backlash from agribusiness and farmers in your town and in your states, right? You're going to be obviously running for New York City in 2021, and that's, to a lot of politicians, that would be a reason to not share. So what has really motivated you to say, no, I am going to stand up for the health of your constituents, which is what you're doing?
And that's such a great question, because food is very fascinating. If I were to tell my friends that, hey, if I was a smoker, that, hey, I'm giving up cigarettes, they would be encouraging. Mm-hmm. If I were to say that, listen, I feel I'm drinking too much and I want to give up alcohol, it would be encouraging. For some reason, if you tell people you're no longer going to eat meat, I can't go out with you anymore. They sort of want to abandon you. And then you have just the industries around, not only the meat and dairy industry, who they must have photos of me in their office that they throw darts at. But then you have the pharmaceutical industry. When you start engaging in a conversation that people don't have to be hooked on drugs their entire lives, many people, it rub people the wrong way. And I just try to explain to people, it's about choices. Every person should have the right. When you go into the hospital and they tell you that you're going to either be on metformin and insulin the rest of your life, we should give people a choice and say, here's another lifestyle medicine way you could address the issues you are facing with chronic diseases. That's the program we have at Bellevue Hospital, the first of its kind in America. But we have a lifestyle medicine where we partner with Dr. McMacken, and we have over 750 people on the waiting list. Over 200 people that are enrolled, and they all are doing well in the program. But it's about giving people health choices on how they want to deal with the health crises that they are faced with. And so, yes, we have naysayers. I remember some of the doctors that I met with didn't want me to go to plant-based. And my mother's doctor actually dropped her as a patient and stated that if you're going to try to get off insulin, I can no longer keep you as a patient. And so that's why it's important that our medical schools start to embrace this real conversation of lifestyle medicine.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt. This lifestyle that you have adopted changed you physically. Did it change you at all as a person?
Yes, and that's very well said. The lifestyle really took me into another level of just human consciousness and awareness of the clarity of mind and thought, the almost stoic understanding that not getting stressed out, and just this constant pursuit of how do you find that equilibrium of life itself, because you cannot get junk food out of your physical body and then you keep junk food in the anatomy of your spirit. They don't go together. Just as your body needs a balanced nutritional diet, our spirits need it as well. And that means the right visuals that you see, because there's more than one way to take in and to consume something. We think of consumption based on what we eat, but consumption is also based on what we see, based on what we hear, based on what we feel. And so I have no tolerance for any fast food, over processed food that I put in my mouth, and I don't allow any fast food, processed food that I put in the anatomy of my spirit. There's a level of just peacefulness that has accompanied this pursuit of eating the right things. And I think it's just turned me into a different person. As I stated, if I look back at myself and try to say, I don't know how I spent so many years as a caterpillar, that I'm now seeing these wings as a butterfly. And I thank for that period of time I spent in that cocoon, because it made me a different person, and not only a better borough president, but a better human being.
lot of people don't know, some people do, that children who receive free school lunch, they have to take a carton of milk unless they have a doctor's note in most states. And as you know, and a lot of people that listen to the show know, because I talk about it all the time, 65% of the world's population is lactose intolerant. 36% of Americans, that is a third of our population. That's about 120 million people that dairy makes them sick, uncomfortable, and makes them have difficulty breathing, right? It really exacerbates asthma as well as other types of breathing problems. So you're addressing this with your pilot program, from what I understand. Will you tell us about that?
Yes, when you think about it, it's almost political malpractice, what we're doing every day to Americans. And agencies on the federal, the state, and city level, they feed our healthcare crisis. And I'm sure one day we're going to look back on what we're doing, and it's going to be unimaginable. It's almost equivalent to the days when doctors used to tell their patients it's okay to smoke. And they used to do advertisement with doctors in their white coats telling people, the best way to relax is to make sure you have a cigarette. And we look back on it and say, what were we thinking? And we are at that place again. We're going to look back on this and we're going to see the ailments and what we have done to our children and families based on our overconsumption of milk and dairy, meat and dairy, and say, what we actually do with this? And so my goal is to allow students to have an alternative to dairy, to use some of the plant-based milks, which are really good. I mean, almond milk, oat milk. Oat milk is one of my favorites. Cashew milk, some of these good milks that, one could have instead of some of the dairy that is really bad for you. And, not only the discomfort of, being gassy and feel bloated and, the problem of breathing, but long-term medical impact. How do we have a Department of Health that spends millions of dollars to fight childhood obesity, childhood diabetes, childhood asthma? Yet in New York City, we feed our children 960,000 meals a day that causes childhood obesity, childhood diabetes, childhood asthma. It just really makes no sense. And so our goal is to move to a healthy food consumptions in our school, particularly in those schools that you receive a free or reduced lunch. Particularly here in New York, our students all allow free lunches. Now think about this for a moment. Many of our children receive 2 meals a day from school. If those 2 meals are unhealthy, they're going home to communities where they don't have healthy food. So for the most part, our children, their entire childhood is spent eating foods that are not healthy at all. That is so dangerous. And, the body, we're able to function for long periods of time. We chuck along, maybe lethargic, maybe having colds all the time, maybe dealing with asthma. But you reach a certain part, just like a car. If you give it bad gas for so many years, it's only a matter of time before it breaks down. And now our bodies as vehicles, they're breaking down younger and younger. The issues that our young people are experiencing, they're getting them at a young age. And as I stated, 70% of our 12-year-olds having early signs of heart disease, our number one killer in America. Mm-hmm. That should be enough to call for major changes. And milk and the sugar in milk and all the other byproducts, that is one of the leading causes of it.
And also, I read, tell me if I'm wrong, that as an environmentalist, you also are working, or maybe it's included in this pilot program, but in Olympia, Washington, they also offer non-dairy milk, and they provide it in dispensers instead of individual containers so that it helps the environment.
Yes, and that's the goal. We want to, and that's the win-win here. We want to do things that would not only focus on one part of improving our lives, but how do we do it in a holistic fashion? And so when you're able to get away from individual cartons, when you're able to get rid of producing food products, as we're looking at having rooftop gardens in our schools. We believe every school building should have a rooftop garden so our children can grow food, learn about the food, serve it in the cafeteria, have it part of a curriculum around education. You know, you can use math. 1 apple plus 1 pear equals healthy. You know, there are ways to be creative and introduce food into our entire conversation and ensuring that our young people, as they get engaged in how they make this planet a friendlier place by having less cartons, by using different ways to deliver food sources, we can play a major role in making this a user-friendly planet, and that's our goal.
Mm-hmm. We've seen a handful of cities implement a soda tax. I think it failed in New York City. But what are your thoughts on using taxation as a way to implement health policy?
I think it's smart policy. I believe it's the right policy. I cannot dictate what you drink or eat. I think there are 2 areas we need to examine. One, if you decide, based on the information, if you decide that you're going to eat food and drink high sugary items with the full knowledge that they are going to aggravate your health through diabetes or other health-related issues, then I should not have to pay your medical expenses. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to get in the way of determining what you're eating, but tax dollars should not continue to go to paying your medical expenses. If we have a tax associated with those sugary items, then you are paying for your own medical system, and you are putting medical money. That money should be in a lockbox. That goes directly to our medical needs that these sugary items are causing. I don't care if we let the individual put his own escrow account when he needs it, because he will need it, whatever creative way we want to do it, and send a message, you know, we're taxing you and we want you to put it in an escrow because you're going to need this medical care. Maybe that will have him or her more focused on how serious this is. Second, government should not be paying to create the healthcare crisis. As I indicated, government is a major feeder of those who are in need. We feed millions of people in our homeless shelters, millions of students, millions of people in our correctional facilities, millions of seniors, ACS, Child Protective Custody. All of these places where we are in contact with citizens, and we normally, when government is in contact with citizens, they're in contact with them when they're going through a very stressful and a period where they are in high needs. That is our time to introduce them to a healthier lifestyle so that they can not only deal with the immediate stress that they are dealing with, but also to show them how to prevent some of the chronic diseases that are really pervasive. And so we need to stop, and that was one of the initiatives that we introduced legislation through for the pandemic, coronavirus, that any money that the government gives to people to provide meals and food, that money cannot be used on unhealthy food, so that we can stop saying we're feeding the healthcare crisis in our city.
Mm-hmm. You talked a little bit about personal responsibility, but in a lot of areas there is food apartheid. And in Brooklyn, and in New York City, and maybe in your borough in particular, there are issues about there being just very difficult to get this healthy food that you're talking about.
You are so right. And it would surprise people when they think how difficult it is. There are some communities where you will go into the local grocery stores or the local, what they call bodegas, the little corner stores, and their definition of a produce section is a wilted a head of lettuce, mm-hmm. and a molded banana. You really don't have the diversity of food You don't have good quality food, so whichever term we want to use, from food apartheid to food insecurity, the reality is that we don't have access to healthy food. And so one of the initiatives we're looking at is how do we bridge technology with using new methods to grow foods in an urban environment, using hydroponics to actually grow food, vertical farming. We have introduced and invested millions of dollars in our educational system to build out these types of systems inside our schools to introduce our children to healthy food. But you're right, the lack of access to good, healthy food is leading to the problem that even if someone wants to eat better, the affordability and the access to healthy food is just not readily available in far too many communities.
Mm-hmm. So you must have some plans that are brewing in regards to food policy if you're elected mayor in 2021.
A number of smart policies, as I indicated. We're going to change our food procurement system. We were successful in getting the city to stop purchasing processed meat. In the city of New York, it was an amazing initiative. And so our schools will no longer have processed meat. But we're at a 50% reduction in beef. We're going to go all the way. We're not going to be in the business of purchasing beef in the city. We're also going to change what's on our menus in our hospitals, health in hospital. Think about it for a moment. Someone goes into the hospital for some form of complications with their colon. As soon as they get out of surgery, the first thing they get to eat is the item that caused the complication in the first place. So we're going to change how we eat and change our buying power and our procurement power. The goal is to have a new version of a Department of Health, a new reform of Department of Health to be in control of the buying power of the city. The Department of Health should be buying the food that we are supplying to New Yorkers, but that Department of Health must also go through a necessary training and education, because the depth of the lack of knowledge of healthy food has become so pervasive throughout government. And one of the biggest impediments to having New Yorkers eat healthy are the various agencies that don't believe that we can actually eat healthy in the first place. They believe a great alternative is a cheese toast sandwich. That's a great alternative, or fried fish sticks or something like that. So we really must start educating those who are the feeders to get healthy food. Then we're going to make a real push to use alternative milk instead of milk, but alternative dairy products, I should say, in our schools and in our other facilities. We often look at schools, but remember, we feed millions of New Yorkers on so many different levels. And the goal is to look at all of those entry points where we're feeding New Yorkers to make sure that we're feeding them healthy meals. And then really teach curriculums around healthy meals so we can start raising young people in a borough like New York or city like New York. Many of our students are first-generation immigrants, and young children have always navigated the complexities of cities for their families. And so we can teach the children, they would go home and start teaching their parents. So we'll change some of these cultural norms that we're seeing inside our city of New York.
And isn't it less expensive for a municipality or a government entity to buy foods that aren't meat and dairy? And they don't have the problem of trying to store them either, which is a big issue with meat and dairy.
So true, so true. And I look at my own food bill. I'm amazed at how much my food bill has decreased so much. And showing people, educating people. I remember attending a food pantry and we were giving out vegetables, and I handed someone a beet, and each person, one after the other, they said, I don't know what to do with that. What is that? And so part of what we must do is meet people where they are and take them where they ought to be. We need to have a series of courses on how to prepare food. What are the different types of food? What are the different types of spices? What are they good for? How to chop up a beet, how to saute it, how to make beet chips. There are different things we can do with food, but we need to instruct people and not just leave them to learn on their own. We do a program at Borough Hall, vegan curious meetups every 3 months, and we have different people come in to instruct our audience on different ways to eat healthy and to answer some of those simple questions. And so, yes, it is. It could be less expensive if we do a better job. Anything from a bag of lentils, dried lentils. You can make a lentil burger, lentil stew, a lentil salad. There's so much you can do with that $2.70 bag of lentils that can stretch and help feed a family of 4 for several days. And that's what we want to show people, how inexpensive it is in the short term and in the long term. Because if you're eating healthy, you're not going to have to pay the price later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so true. And you have a Meatless Monday program in 15 Brooklyn schools. How's that doing? Was it hard to get that into the schools? Did it seem too radical?
You started out first talking about, the Meatless Mondays concept. People thought that, what are you trying to do here? And, the number one question that you're asked all the time, how is my child going to get his or her protein? And as we all say in this universe, they get it the same way cows get it. Yeah. But that is part of the entire goal by showing people gradually. You do Meatless Mondays, and then you continue to move to a Meatless Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and eventually people will evolve to a level of having meatless meals in our school system. So it has been successful. We have been very excited about it. There was a lot of concerns in the beginning, but those concerns have dissipated and it has been embraced, and we're looking to continue to explore other options of bringing healthy meals into schools.
I'd like to move for a moment from food and look at your history as a Black man, and 22 years you served and protected the people as a cop. And I know Alexandra and I, during the climate that we're in right now, are just constantly trying to figure out and talk about how to be a better white person and when you know better, you do better. And I want to learn from you. I want to learn how to better balance the intricacies of our climate right now. What can we glean from you? What should we be thinking about to really make change happen?
And when you say we, you mean we white people?
I guess all of us too, but yes, I want to learn.
Racism is a white issue.
Yep.
We started it. We need to fix it, right?
It's amazing to me when I reflect over my life that I did not take a communication course until I got into college. And at the heart of our problems, I believe, lies in the inability to communicate. Mm-hmm. We don't teach our children how to communicate. We have a national dialogue where people are no longer talking to each other. We have defined leadership as how many likes you have on Twitter. And we are bullied. We've become bullies in this country. And there's a level of meanness that I believe that has become pervasive. And it is difficult if we don't first acknowledge, that we have a problem. If anyone who has ever attended NA or AA or any form of treatment would tell you the first thing you do is you say, I am A. And you acknowledge who and what you are so you can make the steps to become better than that. And so I think at the heart is what we've done even before this movement started and even before coronavirus. We were having an increase in hate crimes in the city. And we put in place something called Breaking Bread, Building Bonds. 100 dinners across the city with 10 people who don't know each other and they all come from different backgrounds. No two groups are the same. And they sit down and have a dinner and talk to each other. People may think that's simple, but no. It's amazing, as diverse as this borough and city is, how little we know of each other. We pass each other every day. We all go into our silos and just exist in our own comfort zone. We need to really lean into the joy of healthy discomfort as we continue to grow and evolve. And I think that if we start engaging in conversation, started seeking to understand so we can be understood, sharing our true feelings and emotion and without being judgmental, and then taking steps to look in every area of our society to deal with the racism that exists in our society and deal with the anti-Semitism, deal with the sexism. Our society the DNA of our society is really tied up in isms. And we stigmatize so many groups and people. And so I think this is a great moment for all of us. I'm so excited to what this country is going to become, and really what our young people are doing and what they are becoming as they're fostering this relationships. I'm seeing young whites and young blacks marching together, standing together, being unafraid about the future. And we may not realize it, but we're actually living out the words of Dr. King's when he says that his children and young white children would be able to join hands together. That's what we're seeing. And I know it's a painful period. It's a period that sometimes we feel as though, as I said in the beginning of this conversation, we feel as though we are being buried. But no, we're being planted. And I think the fruits of the harvest of healthy conversation is going to produce a harvest that all of our children are going to benefit from. If we like it or not, we were in a bad place as a country. And coronavirus revealed how bad we were. And just as I believe some of the national politics, it also has revealed how bad we were. And because of that, I think we're coming out on the other side. And I'm excited of what I'm seeing. And I just thank God I'm alive right now to experience this and this level and this magnitude.
I need to move back to New York so I can vote for him. I lived there for a long time, and I've been out here for 25 years. But how do you encourage people, and what do you say to them in terms of creating change in their local communities? Maybe somebody, really all of them that aren't, you don't have the political podium that you do. They're just people like Alexandra and I. What do you encourage them to do?
I like that. Be intentional about diversifying your network of people. Be intentional about it. That is so important. I am so intentional about being in different groups and learning. And it's all of us seek to be in familiar environments for the most part. Some people are just so extrovert that they just feel natural everywhere. But for the most part, many of us seek to be in environments that we are familiar with, but really be intentional. Like, I'm intentional about two things I do every day. One, I do my 100-point list. And the second, I do my list of who I met that was not a Black person today. And I am intentionally starting my day. It's almost like quantum physics states, if you notice something, then it will start to appear. I start my day with the mission. I'm going to meet people from other backgrounds to add to my list of friends and people that I know and I'm learning from. And my list of friends, even when you look at one of the most important parts of running for mayor is raising the money to do so. And we look at the thousands of people who have contributed to my campaign, I have more people that are Asian, more people that are from Pakistan, from Korea, African American, Caribbean, Sephardic Jewish community, Hasidic Jewish community, from Nepal, all of these different groups, because I encourage myself to break out of my norm. And so that's what I really encourage. Start your day and say, I'm going to seek out people who are not like me. I'm going to volunteer in communities where people who are not like me. I'm going to be a pen pal to someone across town and just introduce myself. Just as we have a theme in politics called cold relationships introduction in the supermarket one day, and just, hey, how you doing, ma'am? My name is Susan. I'm trying to learn a new dish outside. Just finding ways to engage people in conversation. I'm amazed at how much people want to befriend other people. When I go to a Pakistani supermarket and I stop and I'll speak with someone, that's one of my favorite lines. Hey, I want to really learn a new Pakistani or spice that comes from the origin that you're from. Can you walk me through some? People just love helping people. Mm-hmm. We just don't give them the opportunity to do so. Start small, have small gatherings with different diverse groups. Host a dinner. Breaking bread, building bonds. Host a dinner with 10 different groups and ask them, can they introduce you to 10 people in their network? And it just grows so fast. And the second thing I do every day is my 100-point list. I start my day with the goal, I have to do 100 things that's acts of kindness, and I've attached a point system to it. If I hold the doors for someone, that's a point. If I get up on the bus or train and give someone my seat, that's another 2 points. If I buy a meal for someone that's homeless, that's 5 points. At the end of the night, I have to get 100 points. If I don't get 100 points, whatever is the difference, I put in a jar in dollar bills, and at the end of the week, I would donate it to a worthy cause. So each night, I remind myself every day, did you do 100 acts of kindness? And if you don't, at the end of the week, you're going to donate that dollar amount so that you will always average 100 points a day of doing acts of kindness. So I want to build into my normal interactions. How do I become a kinder, gentler human being? And I just feel that I've deposited into the social bank of life. And when the time comes that I have to draw on that equity because I'm going through a terrible moment, I've deposited enough to get the equity out of it.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
I love that.
That's
and
beautiful.
I appreciate the initial discussion on really how we can intentionally reach out, because before you finished, I was going to say, all right, tell me how, because Mr. Man who goes to 13 events a day, you have an opportunity. And I don't know, but I like that. I like that volunteer and have a pen pal. And I live in I'm one of the only white people in my neighborhood that is pretty mostly Indian and Asian. And the lady that lives across the street, I am friendly with, but I'm going to take that as a challenge. You don't know me that well, but that's how I do things. I'm an athlete, so I'm going to walk across the street and I'm going to invite her and her husband to dinner and get to know her. We're just always kind of like, hey, Indian. She's like, hey, white lady. And you're on.
I love that. That is really powerful. And I have benefited from it so much. Like, I've been back and forth to Turkey 7 times, China 7 times, from people I met that invited me to their hometowns, and those relationships, to live in an environment where it's diverse, to then go, because if you're a traveler, that there's no better way to visit a country than through the eyes of a person who's from there. So I just, the relationships are amazing, that I have developed with people are just so hospitable that I have benefited from these different relationships of just visiting people all over the globe. And when I get there, they say, oh, go look at my cousin or my aunt. And it just has been amazing by expanding ourselves beyond our comfort zone And I love that idea that you say, just go knock on the door and say, hey, I met you I've seen you for years. We would really like to invite you and your husband over for dinner one day. And she will embrace it.
That's great.
I'm excited. I'm going to report back. I'll let Rachel know what happened. She can tell you.
I think you can add a whole bunch of points for being on this podcast because you have done so much good, just not only for Dotsie and me, look what you've, and for that woman, your neighbor, but also for all our listeners. And we just want to thank you so much for being such an inspiration, doing amazing work on the local level in Brooklyn, hopefully New York City as a whole and beyond, because you're so inspirational.
Thank you. Look forward to it. So thank you so much for having me. And we all have an opportunity to switch for good.
Yay! You mind if I cut that clip and replay that over and over and over again on our social media? Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
So much. Bye-bye.
Really appreciate it. Take care.
Hey, folks. Okay. Back by very popular demand is our plant-powered plate fridge magnet, which you are going to receive for free if you leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. So here are the details. Just write your quick review. Does not need to be long, does not need to be a whole story. Just be honest and speak from the heart. Then take a quick screenshot of the review you wrote and email it to us at podcast@switchforgood.org. That's podcast@switchforgood.org. And include your mailing address so we can send you a power plate. We are doing this because the more reviews we garner, the higher we go in search results, which means more folks will learn about our podcast. So the power is in your hands. Leave us a review and zoom, your power plate arrives at your doorstep.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.